You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In every corner of the world, people celebrate English tradition and values as members of the Royal Society of St George. Yet here in England, branches are closing as membership dwindles.
I feel that in this country, St George is all but dead and buried.
Until recently, Stephen Warden from Wigston was president of the Leicestershire branch. Despite spending £1,500 of his own money advertising, he couldn't find enough members to keep it running.
I did everything humanly possible to get new members into the branch from the local environment, but they were just not interested in joining.
He thinks changing demographics and declining interest in the society's values contributed to disappearing membership. But he also blames political leadership at national and local levels. Stephen claims his proposal for a St George's Day parade was repeatedly rejected by Leicester City Council over 10 years. A celebration is planned for St George's Day, but like most cities and towns, no parade will pass through the streets. A Leicester City Council spokesperson said, Leicester's annual celebrations of St George's Day have been organised and funded by the City Council for many decades, and they remain an important part of the city's festival calendar. Some in Leicester say they would like to see more done to celebrate England's patron saint.
I think it's a sign of patriotism. I think it helps the country. We celebrate a lot of religious festivals here.
People forget, I think, what is important to England.
Maybe it's been sort of jumped onto with the wrong crowd, but I think nowadays it's just completely different.
Back in Wigston, St George's Cross flies above Stephen's home.
It makes me feel good because I know at least I've not forgotten St George if everybody else has.
9:30 on Monday, the 29th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So, child human shields. Border Force officials exclusively tell GB News that migrants are using children to stop police from approaching boats leaving France for Britain. Mark White has the latest.
Well, officials say this is a deeply alarming development, and it comes against the backdrop of rapidly increasing violence towards police on French beaches.
Hums are on the brink. The SNP leader could quit imminently after failing to drum up enough support to survive a confidence vote in the Scottish Parliament.
Get back to work. That's the government's message this morning as they claim being back in the workplace is better than benefits for those who are suffering with their mental health. Do you agree?
And good news, a royal recovery. King Charles to return to public life, but not all good news. Yes, Harry's coming back to Britain next week too, but not for long, we hope.
And dying with dignity, Dame Esther Ranson and Prue Leith join a host of celebrities and campaigners as they back a change in the law on assisted dying. Would you like to support that change? And why are we in a mental health crisis in this country?
Well, I don't think we are. I think there's just too many people... what we used to regard as just parts of the burden of daily life, ordinary life, we're now saying it's our mental health, and we have to be at home and we have to be paid by the taxpayer. They've got to get a grip with it.
But something's happened. Something's happened. You only have to look around the supermarket, how miserable everybody looks, though. Yeah. They do look miserable. We locked down the country for 2 years of healthy people and we wonder why there's a reverberation. I think that was partly to do with it. But has it swung too far, the pendulum, in terms of, as Andrew says, just kind of pathologising normal human emotions? gbnews.com/your say is the website to get in touch with us this morning. First, though, the very latest news with Sam.
Bev and Andrew, thank you very much. Very good morning to you. The headlines just after 9:30. It's being reported that Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, is considering resigning rather than facing 2 confidence votes later this week. Sources suggest resignation is now an option on the table, but that a final decision hasn't been taken. The SNP leader's been struggling to secure support after he terminated a power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens last week. The UK and Irish governments are due to meet in London later amid an escalating row over migrants, with the EU also being drawn into the argument. The Irish government says it's seen an increase in asylum seekers crossing from Northern Ireland and plans to return them to the UK. However, sources in Westminster suggest that Britain won't take back any migrants unless the European Union also accepts those coming across the English Channel in small boats. Well, that comes as senior border force officials have raised concerns that people crossing the Channel in small boats are, they say, using children as human shields to evade police. In just 1 week, over 900 migrants crossed to the UK, with 359 arrivals on Saturday alone. 51 of those were rescued after running aground. Meanwhile, preparations are underway for detention and transfers to Rwanda, marking the final phase of the Home Office implementing the government's plan. It's being reported that people suffering from some mental health issues will lose access to their sickness benefits as part of big welfare changes. The Times newspaper has suggested that ministers will propose offering meaningful support like counselling instead of benefits payments. Charities, though, claim the move's about cost-cutting and not about care. However, the government argues it shouldn't be paying people to deal with ordinary difficulties in life. New laws protecting consumers from hacking and cyber attacks are now in force, with all smart devices required to meet minimum security standards. Manufacturers of products like phones, TVs and smart doorbells are now legally required to protect internet-connected devices against possible access by criminals. Weak default passwords such as admin or 12345 will be banned, and users will be prompted to change them. Those are the headlines from the newsroom. For more, do sign up to GB News Alerts. You can scan the QR code there on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
Really?
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. We're actually just talking about the fact that Humza Yousaf might resign during this show. That's what we're just looking at now. So
we think he could be gone within an hour and a half. He won't be missed, and if you're in Scotland, we'd like you to tell us exactly what you think about him and the possible replacement. Amazing how quickly it's all fallen apart for the Scottish National Party government. Nicola Sturgeon, one of the most longest-serving leaders in Europe, powerful, master of all she surveys. She resigns and it's fallen apart.
Why? Because he wasn't a strong enough replacement, you think?
No, but he was her choice, so they backed him, even though he wasn't clearly up to it.
Right, so don't go anywhere this morning. gbnews.com/your say to let us know your thoughts. Now, the government has hit out at the EU, accusing them of double standards following Ireland's pledge to send asylum seekers back to the UK.
I love this story. Tensions rose after senior ministers in Ireland threatened to draft emergency laws amid concerns that Rishi Sunak's plan to redirect asylum seekers to Rwanda means people are coming from Northern Ireland into the south because they're dreading being sent to Africa.
So Piers Pottinger now is with us, the founder of Europe's biggest PR firm, Bell Pottinger, with a wealth of political experience under your belt as well, Piers. So how is this going to play out for Sunak now? Because it does appear that even the suggestion that Rwanda flights would take off is acting as the deterrent that he hoped that it would, but not necessarily in the interests of Ireland.
No, I mean, it's certainly appears to be working in some cases, and some people are put off, and we've seen on news bulletins people, the BBC particularly, interviewing, as they love to do, people trying to get across to this country, and some of them are definitely put off. But the funny thing now is that Ireland is seeing what it's like being in the EU, because of course we'd like to send a lot of these illegal immigrants back to France, but we can't because of EU laws, which I'm still a bit baffled by, because I thought we'd left the EU. But Ireland, of course, who are in the EU, can't send them back to us.
No, and we're refusing to have them anyway.
And we don't want them anyway, quite rightly.
Yeah.
So even though it's a tragic situation in some cases, it's quite amusing to see the Irish in this predicament. But I do think that even though the Rwanda policy I've never thought would work properly, and we're only talking about a few hundreds of people being flown out there, I do think it's had a little bit of an effect in a key week for Rishi.
Yeah. Also, Piers, in the Sunday papers this weekend, the revelation that the European People's Party, its most famous member is Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, they are now looking at a safe third country to process asylum applications. So we're there first.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe they'll send them to Rwanda.
Maybe they will. And, I mean, and also I think Rwanda, I saw some research that said Rwanda is a lot safer than London.
Yeah, well, Ireland...
certainly they solve more crimes than they do in London.
And a court in Ireland says we can't send these asylum seekers back to Britain because Britain's not a safe country because of our policy on Rwanda.
No.
You couldn't make any of this up.
No, I mean, if Sadiq Khan wins the mayoral election, I'd like to send him to Rwanda on a fact-finding mission to see how they solve crime.
Well, talking of crime, Mark White's very excellent package, Piers, about how some of these wretched men are using children as
shields,
human shields to stop them getting on the boats. What do you think
of course,
about that?
one died the other day, and that's tragic, absolutely tragic. But, I mean, these criminals who are making huge sums of money by human trafficking have no morals, have no integrity. They don't give a damn. They're just interested in money to fuel their own lifestyle. It's horrific. But, again, it's very hard to stop this, particularly when the French don't seem to be helping us much. And the French police normally are quite keen on a punch-up, and I'm surprised they haven't actually stopped more people. When we saw some of the footage of them trying to pretending to stop people, which they could easily, surely have done. Also, they just puncture the dinghies, stop them floating.
Easy.
It seems to me that the French are really doing a very poor job, and we ought to be focusing more on getting... It's the one thing the Labour Party have got right on their immigration policy is to say they want to focus more on getting the French to do more. And that, I think, is indeed a worthwhile exercise, if they'll ever do it.
Let's talk about this developing political situation in Scotland.
Scottish man.
Yes, hallelujah.
Scottish history.
So, all right, well, just give us your opinion on it. Of course, when Nicola Sturgeon stepped down and it was Kate Forbes or Humza Yousaf, and the job, obviously, the First Minister went to Humza Yousaf. I personally was a little disappointed. I quite like Kate Forbes. I felt
I think everyone
some of the things she said were a little, very controversial.
She was crucified because she was honest and said she didn't believe in sex outside of marriage and she didn't believe in same-sex marriages.
Which is a bit weird, let's be honest, in the 21st century.
But she's entitled to her view. She's very deep Christian.
But I love the fact that she told us honestly what she felt, even if it was going to be controversial.
And, I mean, I think she was the nearest thing the SNP had to a sensible person. But Scotland will be rejoicing today because Yousaf is doing the first sensible thing he's ever done, and that's resign. He's completely useless. He's made a mess of everything he's done. And the SNP are responsible for doing huge damage to Scotland, which is far worse off than England because of the SNP, nobody else. The SNP are to blame for the appalling decline in education, the rising crime, the terrible drug deaths, and also, which as a Scot I find deeply upsetting, the way the SNP have fuelled not just sort of friendly rivalry, but deep hatred for the English. It's part of the United Kingdom. We're the same island. And the SNP, unforgivably, have stoked this antagonistic attitude for years and years, so much so that it's very hard to reverse. And when I go back to Scotland, I find it very, very unsettling.
It's interesting. I think 10 years ago we had the referendum, which was going to be once in a generation referendum. It's all over now, isn't it?
I mean,
nobody's talking about independence.
Because finally, I mean, I think every decent Scots person has now realised that the damage the SNP have done to their country is so great they have to go and forget independence, which is pie in the sky anyway. Their own former chief economist has said it would never work, which indeed it wouldn't. And also the ludicrous idea of going, separating from England and then going into the EU, which is an even bigger bureaucracy and administration that would cause them give them much less independence.
And what currency would they? And what currency would they have?
Well, I don't think they'd have any currency because they'd run out of money by then.
We shouldn't forget also the mad law they brought in just a couple of weeks ago, which is, what is it now, 12,000, 13,000, 14,000 people, you know, this new hate crime law, and also their position on gender.
Yeah, I mean, both of them are absurd.
Yeah.
They're not focusing on on the fundamental issues that affect everyone in Scotland. And they've still got, the SNP, ongoing scandals. There's this continuing investigation into Peter Murrell. There's also the ferries scandal that's still there. There's the roads they promised that never built.
5 years delayed, the ferries.
And 400 million over budget. 400 million
incredible.
Of Scottish taxpayers' money wasted by these incompetent fools. And doing a partnership with the Greens was also crazy, because the Greens, if possible, in Scotland, are even crazier than the SNP. I know it's hard to believe.
This other big story that we're talking about this morning, Piers, our inbox is full of people getting in touch. It's about this, where we stand as a country and how we feel about the mental health issue.
Yes.
And the Conservatives saying that we need to stop just dishing out benefits to people who are just the worried well. A lot of people getting in touch. Treva said it's not the genuine sick and long-term disabled that the new policy is aimed at. It's the young people who got used to furlough and have decided to live on benefits. It's the young who've got the mental trauma of having to get up at a set time to go to work and commit to being at work for 7 hours, 5 days a week. That is the normal pressure of life. It's not an excuse for a lifetime of benefits. What's your take on where we are at now? It feels like we need a bit of a reset on the fact that we are quite resilient.
Yes. I think there are, as always, more than one side to every story here. And there's no doubt that with COVID, it affected a lot of people's mental health much in more longer term than we had maybe first thought. But there's equally a great British malaise of malingering and people who use this mental health as an excuse for not turning up to work and maximising their benefits. Now, those people need to be stopped, and I think the government's right to look at this. But equally, mental health problems are immense in this country, and any doctor involved in mental health would tell you that. My own MP, Dr. Rosina Allen-Khan, who's Labour MP, she was their spokesman for mental health, and she stood down because she didn't feel the Labour Party were doing enough for mental health either. So it's not just the Conservatives. It's actually, I think, a serious problem that does need proper addressing. But the problem with mental health is that the boundaries are so hard to pin down, and you need really real experts to be looking at this and making the decisions on benefits. I think the idea of getting people who are not medical making decisions on whether they're fit or not fit is a mistake.
It's this personal independence payment, which can range between £75 and £108 a week. It's now being paid to 3.5 million people, irrespective of whether they can work or not.
Yes.
I mean, it's been given out like confetti.
Well, this is the problem. We have become, I mean, we are a kind and compassionate country. That's one reason so many illegal immigrants want to come here, because they can take us for a ride.
Yeah.
And the problem is being able to isolate the real, genuine cases versus the malingerers, as I said. And it's for any government, any bureaucrat, it's a very difficult problem, and it's been exacerbated by COVID without any doubt.
Really interesting.
But I wouldn't lay that at the government's feet. I don't think that's fair.
Oh, I think that's a very fair thing to do. I don't think it was exacerbated by COVID, but by COVID policy, by locking healthy people. If we lock up healthy young people, take their education away from them, close businesses, people lose their houses, then let's not be surprised that we've got
I think with hindsight,
epidemic of mental health.
With hindsight, it could have been handled better, I agree. But I don't think the actual root causes of mental health are this government's fault. And I think we've, as a country now, have got into the routine of blaming the government for everything. One shouldn't do that. One should really look at the problem.
Almost every government in the world did the same thing. It is worth saying that, I agree.
But also, I think COVID also created a society where they said, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course they did.
Handing out money. And we've got to get them out, as you said,
I mean, look at the civil servants who don't want to go into the office even 2 days a week, for goodness sake. And the point is, going into an office is good for mental health, because you're with other people, you're getting some sort of sense sense of community.
I agree.
As opposed to staying at home malingering and just tucking into another great can of strong cider.
Right, thank you, Piers. Oh, that sounds quite nice. Can we go home and do that?
A bit early.
Good to see you. Right, up next, assisted dying laws in the spotlight once again as Westminster debates the issue this afternoon. We're going to have more on that in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles is well known for his views on climate change, and apparently he's now taking steps to make sure that his Sandringham estate is more eco-friendly. Well, it's been reported that the King is planning to have 2,000 solar panels installed on that estate, and it's set to make the estate largely self-sufficient with a supply of its own green electricity. Well, joining me now is former Royal correspondent, the absolute legend, that is Michael Cole. Michael, twice in 2 days, I feel blessed. Look, King Charles has long been talking up his eco-credentials. Some may uncharitably compare him to Greta Thunberg in a tweed suit. It's one thing, however, to be self-sufficient in energy, but got to be said, solar panel farms, they're hardly eco-friendly, are they? They destroy environments. What's your take?
I certainly agree with that. The King has indeed, as you say, Martin, and good afternoon to you, applied for planning permission. Now, this is going to be a bit of a mini solar farm, 2,000 solar panels on a site of 2 hectares. And as he has the Sandringham estate, 20,000 acres, 4 acres isn't going to be very much, and it's nowhere near where he lives at Sandringham House. Now, these things, which we're seeing on the screen, are hugely controversial up here. A monster one is being planned on the borders between Suffolk and Cambridge, and the people there really despise it. As they say quite rightly, is this grade A agricultural land being turned over to this semi-industrial use and spoiling the look of the countryside and changing it in a negative way.
Join me, Camila, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tomy Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis. And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News. I just want to read one of the messages from our viewer, Tony. He says, mental health crisis. I totally agree with Andrew. The population confused not getting what they want as a mental health issue. GPs are given a tick box assessment tool, which is too easy to answer, to indicate a mental health issue. As a now retired psychologist, says Tony, with many years of receiving inappropriate referrals, he would say 85% of them were for people who just had an unrealistic expectation on what they feel they deserve in life. My professional opinion is both parents and schools are not teaching children coping mechanisms and the reality. They're actually looking for mental health issues as opposed to teaching coping strategies. It's so true, that, Tony.
I mean, some people are taking time off work because they've had a relationship breakup. I'm sorry, get on with it.
Life, you know what? Life feels hard. It does feel hard at the moment. It does feel hard.
But it's not mental health. It's called what happens in life.
Yeah.
Up and down. We have our up and down moments.
Yeah.
It's just called life's true course. I mean, it's not smooth, and nor should it be.
Yeah.
It'd be boring. And why should the taxpayer keep funding it?
Yeah. Well, it feels like that, doesn't it?
But
OK.
Right.
That's
now,
our thoughts.
Yes, now, the petition to legalise assisted dying was signed by more than 200,000, which is why there's going to be a debate today in Westminster Hall, which is the second chamber of the Commons, as to whether that people should have the right to legally take their own lives.
So Graham Nichols joins us now, the Director of Affinity at Gospel Churches. Good morning, Graham. Lovely to see you. Do you think that we should be changing the law around assisted dying to facilitate the needs of people like Dame Esther Ranson, who's saying that she wants a choice as to how she ends her life?
No, I don't think we should be changing the law. I think there is the edge cases to do with when treatment is withdrawn and that difficult sort of decisions, whether it's turning the machine off or not taking a particular line of treatment, but actually positively intervening to end someone's life. I think morally as a Christian it's wrong, but I also think practically speaking it opens the floodgates for all kinds of situations, including the ones you were just talking about actually. People with mental health issues, people who've just had a relationship breakdown, people with disabilities saying, well, you should probably end my life because it's not very worthwhile either. So I think it would be disastrous for families, it would be disastrous for the doctor-patient relationship. So I think there's nothing good about it, even though I understand that the emotional sort of persuasion of one or two cases where people might talk about, well, I want the autonomy to be able to do that.
But it's not one or two cases, though, is it? It's a lot more. I mean, there's many people who are... We're living to much older ages now, Graham, and they're terminally ill and they're very sick and they're in great pain, and it's very often the treatment they're having, they feel degraded and they've just had enough.
Yes, I understand. I meant one or two high-profile cases, but of course there are more cases across the country, of course. But degrading and all those kind of words, you're attaching a label to someone who's at the end of their life, which doesn't necessarily have to apply. There is dignity in dying, not in the way that people use that expression, but there is dignity in dying, that person still exists as a human being and they can be treated with dignity. And actually these days they can be treated in a pretty much pain-free way. And I want to respect the person right up to the point that they naturally die, and not to disrespect them by ending their life. I don't think it's a right choice they're making. I don't think it's a wise choice that anyone would make to end their life. But I think worse than that, the pressure that will fall on many people will be horrendous.
OK, thank you, Shorba Sweet. Thank you, Graham. We appreciate your perspective. Graham Nichols there, the Director of Affinity at Gospel Churches. I am sort of on board with the idea that you should be able to have some control over the end of your life. However, I think what I've realised is it would affect how we live every day while we are alive. If you thought you could always control the end of your life, wouldn't it affect every day when you wake up and how you live your life?
But I also worry about the thin end of the wedge. Look what's happening in Canada, where that law now is being changed to allow children to be given dignity in death. That's not what that was about.
Right, still to come, a GBNews exclusive on the extreme rise in violence. But first of all, here is your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to mixed weather conditions across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing some rain at times, but temperatures will also be on the rise. Back to the detail for today now, and we've got an east-west split weather-wise across the UK. Outbreaks of rain moving in across many western spots from the south, turning heavy at times, accompanied by a fairly brisk breeze too. That rain reaching Scotland as we head into the afternoon. So it's the east and southeast that's set to hold on to the best of the conditions. Certainly the southeast of England seeing plenty of sunshine, and in the sunshine it should feel fairly pleasant out and about, with fairly gentle winds towards the southeast too. Temperatures peaking at 16 or 17 degrees, nearer 12 to 14 towards the northwest. As we head into the evening and during the overnight period, further outbreaks of rain will move in across many northern and western parts of the UK, moving up there from the south and again turning quite heavy in nature at times, accompanied by a fairly brisk southerly wind. So it's always the southeast holding on to the clearest skies, but wherever you are, it will be a frost-free night, certainly much milder than in recent nights, lows in the range 7 to 10 Celsius. As for Tuesday, well, the east-west split continues with further pulses of rain moving up across many western spots as we go through the day. Again, the outbreaks of rain turning heavy at times and still quite breezy out across western areas, whereas further east, plenty of fine weather around, lots of sunshine, but notice one or two showers developing across the southeast as we head into the afternoon. Temperatures are still on the climb, though, up to 18 Celsius towards the southeast, so still pretty warm for the time of year, near 17 degrees at best in the north.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Murray, the A96 is closed in both directions at Keith after weekend roadworks overran. In Lancashire, the A56 is closed each way along Skipton Road in Colne after an accident causing queues. In Lincolnshire, the A158 and other approaches to the Gunby roundabout are closed after an accident. In Gloucestershire, on the A417, there's a lane closed eastbound where a vehicle caught fire not far before the air balloon roundabout near Burgley. Long delays with queues back beyond the A46, over halfway back to the M5. In London, Roehampton Lane is closed each way between Red Rover Junction at Barnes and Queen Mary's Hospital at Roehampton after an accident with long delays as you divert. On the M25 in Kent, there's a lane closed for repairs near Junction 5 for the M26 with queues from Junction 4 at Orpington and back on the M26 towards there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking? You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine, what is it? Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Monday the 29th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
On the brink, Humza Yousaf, the SNP leader, could quit imminently. He hasn't drummed up enough support to survive 2 confidence votes. The First Minister has called a press conference for midday.
And migrant violence spikes. Border Force officials claim Channel migrants are using children as human shields in a GB News exclusive.
Is there a possible summer election? The Prime Minister refuses to rule out a July contest, but is it a ploy to keep some of those unruly MPs on side?
And a royal recovery. King Charles is to return to public life as he prepares to meet cancer patients following his own diagnosis.
And disability benefits overhaul. As millions are set to lose payments, the government argues it shouldn't be paying people to deal with ordinary difficulties in life. But do the cuts risk damaging the people who really need the help?
We'd love to hear your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say is the place where you can let us know your opinions, and your messages have been coming in this morning. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
A very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 10. Leading the news this morning, Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf could resign rather than face 2 confidence votes this week. Sources suggest he's considering stepping down, but a final decision hasn't been taken. He's been struggling to secure support after he terminated a power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens last week. And we are expecting later a statement from Humza Yousaf outside Bute House. We will bring that to you when we get it here on GB News. UK and Irish ministers are due to meet in London later amid an escalating row over migrants, with the EU also being drawn into the argument. The Irish government says it's seen an increase in asylum seekers crossing from Northern Ireland and plans to return them to the UK. However, sources in Westminster suggest Britain won't take back any migrants unless the European Union also accepts those coming across the English Channel in small boats. Well, our Home and Security editor Mark White has said this morning that authorities in Dublin are concerned about the impact of the Rwanda plan.
% of the migrants coming into the Republic of Ireland, they say, have come from the UK. They want a returns agreement. They want to return those coming over that border back into the UK. However, the High Court in Ireland has said that would be unlawful to do so because the UK, according to this court, is not a safe country to return these people to because of the potential of them then being sent on to Rwanda.
Well, that comes as senior Border Force officials have raised concerns that people crossing the Channel in small boats are, they say, using children as human shields to evade police. In just 1 week, over 900 migrants crossed to the UK, with 359 arrivals on Saturday alone. 51 of those were rescued after running aground. Meanwhile, preparations are underway for detention and transfers to Rwanda, marking the final phase of the Home Office implementing the government's plan. In other news, it's being reported people suffering from some mental health issues will lose access to their sickness benefits as part of a big welfare change. The Times newspaper has suggested that ministers will propose offering meaningful support like counselling and therapy instead. Charities claim the move's about cost-cutting, not care. However, the government argues it shouldn't be paying people to deal with ordinary difficulties in life. Minister Mel Stride told GB News this morning that the UK can't afford spiralling increases in the welfare bill.
It's very important we also ask key questions about how it operates. Is it properly targeting those who need the help most? One of the concerns I have, for example, are those with progressive, lifelong conditions where currently we know, sadly, people will not be getting better through time, and yet they're having to go through reassessments, jump through bureaucratic hoops and so on. And I want to really look at whether that's appropriate and we can't do things better.
MPs will this afternoon debate whether assisted dying should be legalised for people who are terminally ill. Campaigners and famous faces are expected outside Parliament ahead of that debate. It's after more than 200,000 people signed a petition backed by Dame Esther Ranson calling for the change. Assisted suicide is currently banned in England, Wales and in Northern Ireland. In Scotland, it's not a specific criminal offence, but people who help others to end their own life do risk being charged with murder or other offences. And those who oppose a change in the law say vulnerable people could be pressured into ending their lives. Hundreds of Border Force officers at Heathrow Airport have begun their 4-day strike today in a dispute over working conditions. The PCS union says more than 300 of its members are walking out until 7 a.m. on Friday in protest over plans to introduce new working patterns, which would see around 250 staff forced out of their jobs. The Home Office, though, says it does have plans in place to minimise any disruption at passport control and that they remain open to discussing a resolution with workers. New laws protecting consumers from hacking and cyber attacks are now in force, with all smart devices required to meet minimum security standards. Manufacturers of products of phones, TVs and smart doorbells are now legally required to protect internet-connected devices against possible access by criminals. And weak default passwords such as admin or 12345 will be banned, and users will be prompted to change them. And finally, before we head back to Andrew and Bev, we're being warned to brace ourselves for even more food price rises, with beer, biscuits and bread among the items expected to jump. The wet weather means that harvests of barley and wheat could be down by as much as a fifth. And storms and flooding throughout the last few months have forced British farmers to constantly delay sowing crops. That warning comes just as food prices are beginning to fall following soaring inflation that was sparked by the global gas price crisis. That's the latest from the newsroom. For more, do sign up to GB News Alerts. You can scan the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Beth.
10:07, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Beth Turner.
Just a couple more of your messages before we go on to our Mark White package. Rich has got in touch and said, the strange thing is I know a lot of people on various benefits and various states of health. Everyone I know who should be getting PIP can't get it, and everyone who shouldn't be getting it does. It's totally bizarre. I know a guy who couldn't look after himself, had major cognitive problems and poor health, repeatedly denied PIP. Others get full rate just for being mildly autistic. I wish that someone could explain this and fix it.
This is PIP, is the personal independent payments, which I was referring to. They pay to 3.5 million people who get them irrespective of whether they can work or not.
Yeah. So lots of people. Lorraine has said, I have severe mental health issues, emotionally unstable personality disorder and regularly self-harm. It's difficult to get PIP. The assessment process isn't easy. It's very stressful. It makes me mad that people in the government think mental health can be improved by talking therapy. I definitely don't sit at home with a can of cider each day, as your guest suggested.
The thing is for people like Lorraine, that's the government should be helping them. Yeah. It's the people like Lorraine who are swinging the lead.
What have we done, though, especially the younger generation? The self-harming, particularly with the youngsters, particularly young girls, is just
terrible.
Off the scale.
Now, Border Force officials have told GB News of concerns that Channel migrants, get this, it's shocking, are using children as human shields to stop police puncturing their small boats.
So Mark White was given exclusive access to the Small Boats Operational Command in Dover, and here's what he found.
This is a rare look inside the Small Boats Operational Command at Dover Harbour. As we filmed, the Border Force vessel Defender was alongside, offloading another 66 Channel migrants, the latest of more than 7,000 who've arrived here so far this year. And this, their mode of transport, large but extremely flimsy inflatable rafts, made for the criminal gangs in backstreet factories.
I mean, these aren't seaworthy for anything because they are just not made to any standard.
Trevor Taylor has seen increasing numbers packed into these vessels. 70 or 80 migrants on each boat is now common.
It's just not safe. The way it's constructed, I mean, this is typical where if there was a cut or a puncture in one part of this boat, the whole thing would go down.
Makeshift puncture repair kits and cheap pumps are often all the migrants have as they battle to stay afloat. And there are very few, if any, effective life jackets.
Just show you an example of that. And that's probably not just for a child. They'll probably give that to an adult as well, saying that's going to save you. Another example, just back here, is an inner tube. We quite often see them, or they're handed out in a packet. So basically, if you panic, inflate one of those yourself.
And the engines too are completely unsuitable for the English Channel, lacking power and prone to breaking down.
You look at the engine, you might think, yeah, that's a proper engine, something you might expect. However, the organised crime groups, they put stickers like this on there, so 30, trying to trick you into thinking, 30 horsepower. In reality, it's somewhere between 10 and 15, so really not suitable to go on the boat itself, especially at sea.
The surge in violence along the French coast is of huge concern to authorities on both sides of the Channel. Staff in Dover have seen increasing numbers of migrants arriving with injuries, including stab wounds.
The violence that is now shown to our French colleagues trying to prevent the launches, trying to save these people from putting their lives at risk is huge. We've seen them attacked with sticks, metal bars, machetes, using women and children that are there to cross, using them as human shields to prevent law enforcement taking action. And it's growing, it's getting worse.
This quayside here at Dover Harbour is where the Channel migrants first set foot on British soil. Of course, if Rishi Sunak's Rwanda plan comes to full fruition, then they won't be here for long. Many of them will be on a flight to East Africa. But those flights are likely still months away, and as weather conditions improve in the weeks ahead, many more of these flimsy migrant boats will arrive in UK waters, unseaworthy and dangerously overloaded. Mark White, GB News, at the Small Boats Operational Command in Dover.
Well, Mark White joins us now with some breaking news. Morning, Mark. What's happening?
We're getting reports of another rescue underway in the English Channel. You'll remember, of course, last Tuesday, 5 people died when their boat got into difficulties off the coast near Boulogne. Well, a bit further up this time, off the coast of Calais, as we speak, a rescue operation is underway with reports that some migrants are in the water. So we await to see exactly what will happen with that. Unfortunately, this is just what is par for the course when these criminal gangs are pushing boats off into the English Channel on a day like today when conditions are just not suitable. I mean, there's no suitable conditions for these boats, let's be honest. You saw in the report there, they're flimsy boats that are absolutely packed to the gunnels with dozens of migrants that makes them completely unseaworthy, and it only takes, you know, the odd wave and they're in serious trouble.
Do we know how many are involved in this one, Mark?
We don't. All we know is, of course, the pattern for these small boats going into the Channel is that they usually carry at least 50 or 60 people on board. That boat that got into difficulties last Tuesday had 112 on board because of a new tactic, an emerging tactic there, where groups of migrants, mainly from Africa, who don't have the money to pay the criminal gangs thousands of pounds, storm the boats as they're launching and fight their way, fight amongst the other migrants on those boats to get on. And as such, 112 people were crammed onto this boat last week that got into trouble. We don't know if the same thing has played out on this occasion. We don't know any of the circumstances, just that this rescue operation is underway.
The bizarre thing about last week was the boat carried on. Even though 5 people had died and there were lots in the water, they carried on, and the vessel carried on to England, escorted by a French ship, of course.
Such is the determination of those on the boats to get to the UK. About 50 of them did come off because it was clearly so dangerously overloaded, it would never have made it anyway. So, of course, those that were rescued, and subsequently 5 died, then another 50 agreed to come off and went onto a French vessel and were taken back to France. But 58 continued on the boat and made it to the UK. And we know that a number of those were actually subsequently arrested, and 2 have been charged in connection with the deaths.
Just briefly, are we seeing any impact yet that the Rwanda bill may be a deterrent?
Not necessarily from France, I don't think so at all. But of course, we're hearing from the Irish government that they believe that 80% of the migrants who've come into the Republic of Ireland in recent weeks have come from the north, and the concern is that they're coming because of Rwanda. I mean, I will point out that for many years, the loophole that they're saying they don't want migrants to exploit here has been operating the other way, in that thousands of migrants who've come in through open borders in Europe have ended up in Dublin and have then gone up and over into the UK border on the other way. So there's a meeting that's taking place today, an intergovernmental meeting of foreign ministers, Irish and British foreign ministers, which will discuss this topic, but it's becoming quite an unseemly row.
A huge irony because of the great fuss they made about having no border between the north and south after Brexit.
Well, yes, and they are going to try and push through a law so that they can return those migrants who are coming down from Northern Ireland back to Northern Ireland. But Britain has said it's not going to tolerate that, unless, of course, France agrees to a returns agreement to take the migrants that are crossing the Channel back.
OK, all right, thank you, Mark, and keep us posted on that developing rescue in the Channel.
We're joined now by political commentator Peter Spencer. Peter, morning to you. Good morning. Peter, we're going to hear from the Prime Minister a little later in the programme, but while we're talking about Rwanda and migration, I suspect he's quite happy, because it does seem there might be a little ray of light emerging over this policy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's certainly already bigged up that very point. Say, look, you know, it just shows that the whole idea of this hugely expensive, I have to say, Rwanda scheme was to act, its psychological warfare is to act as a deterrent. So people think, look, there's no point coming to UK because immediately you're going to be shuffled off to some place in Africa, which has at best a questionable record on human rights. Oh, and by the way, it's a one-way ticket, so that's it. You're not coming back to UK. End of story. However, I think it's fair to say that the problem with them popping across from across the border into the Republic of Ireland is one of those many unanticipated and unintended consequences. And I have to say that this is very much part and parcel with the whole Brexit thing, that the problem with the border between the Republic and the north of Ireland was something that was not anticipated when Brexit was being negotiated. So just as you solve one problem, potentially, you actually open another can of worms. And it's not surprising that the Irish are extremely cross about it. I mean, you know, back in the day, the Brits sent a gunboat up the Liffey in the Easter Rising. I don't imagine they'll go as far as sending a gunboat up the Thames, but they're nonetheless jolly cross about it.
Peter, I was just saying earlier off air, we were chatting, I was lucky enough to go to Morocco recently for a little break, and when you walk through the streets of Marrakesh, the poverty is extraordinary. There are men with their feet bound in rags because they don't have shoes, and I looked around and I thought, it's no wonder people want to come to this country when they're living in such abject poverty. If this is a global issue, and we do accept that the majority, let's say, of people on those boats are just desperate for a better quality of life, how do we handle that with countries working together? How?
I mean, that is a huge geopolitical problem, and how in God's name we address that, I really, really do not know, because the point you make, Bev, is absolutely valid. Of course, there are monumental inequities between living standards in the West and so many places in other parts of the world. I mean, there is monumental injustice here, isn't there? And frankly, I cannot see a solution to it. And I think it'll take many, many years before it does get resolved. I mean, I would add one other thing, though, although there is a certain proportion of asylum seekers who most certainly, or they're actually economic migrants, there's also a significant proportion, probably a majority, who are actually escaping persecution and torture and the fear of being murdered. And I mean, we come back to the overall problem in UK of the swelling numbers of asylum applications. And of course, this makes a lot of people jolly cross because it's jolly expensive to put them in hotels and so on. But if the Home Office were to actually get its act together and process their claims within a matter of weeks instead of, as is often the case, over a year, that would save the nation an awful lot.
OK. All right, thank you very much, political commentator Peter Spencer there. It's very pink, that, wasn't it?
Very pink.
Very pink.
He does like pink. But I'm just sick of the Foreign Secretary, by the way, who, by the way, last week confirmed that we would not have to leave the European Court of Human Rights over the Rwanda policy. Didn't I say that? He would never allow the Prime Minister to leave. But also saying, blaming Brexit. The reason we've got such a large number of people pouring across Europe is because of his flipping policy in Libya, when he went to war in Libya and deposed Gaddafi with the French president, and it's been a nightmare ever since, that country.
So much of our Western policy in the Middle East has led to this.
Of course.
To this crisis. But in terms of those people who just want to live a better life, they are economic migrants, and I do understand it. But we can't take everybody.
No,
it would be lovely if we could,
no,
but we can't.
We're full up. We
just can't take that many desperate people.
No.
So what is the solution? Let us know what you think at home. gbnews.com/your say is the website to get in touch with us on. And also we're going to be talking about we have done a discussion about the assisted dying. Jenny has said we put animals out of their misery, but we allow humans to suffer.
Well, that's Esther Ranson's point, isn't it? She had 3 major deaths in her family: her husband, her mother, and her dog, and the dog had a civilised death.
Yeah. Still to come, the return of the King as the monarch prepares to resume royal duties. We'll have the latest on His Majesty's health. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to trans campaigners. The Harry Potter author has called for an investigation into why political parties are embracing the language of pro-trans groups. So is it time to ditch campaign groups such as those? Well, welcome again to my clashers, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser, also businessman and activist Adam Brooks.
I think the Cass report is really welcome. I think there's been a huge amount of agreement, including from some trans rights campaigners, that there's an awful lot of good in the Cass report. I think that I'm more concerned about mermaids, which is currently under a Charity Commission investigation, and some of the reports, if they're to be believed, like sending out chest binders, are more alarming. I think on Stonewall, which has done such great work over the past 30 years on LGBT rights.
It said 2-year-olds could be trans. Now, that is one of the most horrifying things I read today. Actually, J.K. Rowling tweeted that out there. To say that a 2-year-old can think that they can be another gender when my 4-year-old still thinks she's Elsa on some days. You know, there's no common sense, and to me it's
very badly phrased.
It's very sinister that these people actually believe that these kids want to change gender, and unfortunately out there are parents that almost see a trans kid as a fashion accessory now, and I think this whole agenda has pushed on people that this is normal to change gender, and we have to push back. And as I said earlier, to be trans is not normal.
Well, I don't agree with that
extreme.
phrasing. I think it's a big step, Adam, but there are clearly people throughout history who have been
But it's
trans.
not normal behaviour, is it?
I think as far as children are concerned, children need to be given the space to explore the world, and that can include experimenting with, breaking previous gender stereotypes. That doesn't mean that people should be sort of labelled at the age of 2, which I completely disagree with.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It is 10:24. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Beth Turner, and Andrew Pearce, and also our panellists with us, former Labour advisor Matthew Larser and author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe. Good morning.
Good morning.
To you both. Right, so a shock Rwanda move. Front page of The Guardian, Emma. The Home Office is going to launch a major operation to detain asylum seekers in preparation to move them to Rwanda. This did come as a bit of a shock.
Yes, and I don't know what to make of it. Apparently, this is the beginning of the Home Office's kind of crackdown. I mean, what's the effect going to be? It's a kind of major detention operation when asylum seekers turn up for their routine meetings at immigration centres. Apparently, they're going to be detained and moved to detention centres.
Good, they're here illegally.
But is this a sort of look at us acting tough before Thursday?
Yeah.
Also, what effect is it going to have? I should have thought that most people who hear about this, and word spreads when you're in that kind of community, word spreads. People won't be turning up for their meetings. They'll be going rogue.
That's the trouble.
So I wonder if it's going to have unintended consequences.
Of course it will.
Absolutely. And I think it's part of this get tough policy because, of course, they're going to round up more people than can go to Rwanda should a flight even take off.
Hold them for 10 to 12 weeks now. I mean, is that even a sensible thing to do, to plan to do? Because flights are not planned until July.
Sorry, Emma, didn't mean to interrupt. No. So as we were hearing from Mark, one day's boat's worth today, yesterday's boat's worth, would be enough to go to Rwanda. So this seems to be, as Emma says, this seems to be pretty much theatrics, when actually the numbers who are going to go are quite low.
But what's happening in Northern Ireland? You can see the Irish minister actually said on the record the fear of Rwanda is driving people from Northern Ireland, migrants, into the south because they do not want to go to Rwanda, which is why they're now going to try and change the law. Good luck with that.
Well, they're going to face the same problem that we had about whether we send people back to France.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's the kind of domino effect, isn't it? It's the kind of... It's just shoving the... I mean, it reminds us we need to
but it's a sign.
Tackle the problem at source.
It's a sign, Matthew. It is a deterrent to those people in the north. That's why they're getting out of Northern Ireland.
Well,
they think they're going to go to Rwanda.
I mean she may be using that as the political...
What do you mean by tackle the problem at source?
Because we need to do much more to tackle the criminal gangs, which is why Labour's got its plan to smash the gangs, including its cross-border police force.
How are they going to smash the gangs, Matthew? Do tell.
Well, one of the ways is by using the anti-terror legislation, which for example, the Belgians have done very successfully. And so the numbers coming from Belgium has significantly declined because, for example, it means you can get people's mobile phones, take them off them and check where, you know, and trace back where they're coming from. Look, it's not a magic solution, but we want to stop people ever getting on those small boats in France because they're putting their lives at risk as well as being illegal migrants.
Well, then stop them. Can I just say,
deal with the French,
the other problem about this detention plan is that you're going to have, of course, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of protesters at these detention centres. If anyone is laid a hand on, there's going to be legal challenges. Critics are calling this a catastrophic system meltdown. No one is going to be detained and forcibly moved to detention centres because it will simply be people gluing themselves to railings, standing outside these centres.
They'll have their human rights lawyer there.
Of course they have.
And of course there isn't
on legal aid.
There isn't that much capacity in the detention centres. The reason, of course, people live in hotels was because the detention centres ran out of space a long time ago. So I think it's a good headline in search of a solution.
Feels a little bit like style over substance for me, doesn't it?
Totally.
Should we move on to millions on disability benefits? We're talking about this reforms to the benefits system based on your mental health, Matthew.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's two stories being floated today, both on the same subject. But one is that millions of people who have mild, quotes, depression and anxiety are going to be taken off sickness benefit, particularly PIP, personal independence payment, which is the main benefit for those who are deemed not fit for work and therefore they don't have to seek work.
3.5 million people
which
are getting that.
Absolutely,
3.5
which has
million.
gone up. But there's another story which has been floated, which is that the people are going to be paid in vouchers rather than cash, and are going to have to submit receipts for their spending. This is disabled people. Now, I mean, that is going to go down with people who've got very serious health conditions, because as a decent society, those with serious health conditions should be supported. The idea that people are going to have to be sort of submitting their, Aldi and Lidl receipts, first of all, the bureaucracy that would involve, that seems to me another one of these. The government's rather desperate, sort of feeling they've got to be seen to be doing things before Thursday in the elections, before a possible challenge to Rishi, etc. So, I mean, on this taking people with mild depression off benefits, supporting people with mild depression sounds a good thing, but there's nothing in it about supporting people. And it seems to be a bit of an antidote, because Keir Starmer is with his newest MP, Dr Dan Poulter, today, launching a plan for 8,500 mental health workers in schools, which is funded. It's not from it's from a clampdown on a private equity tax loophole. Right. It's not the non-doms.
Do you know his nickname in Parliament? Dan Poulter?
I've heard a few.
Invisible Man. I didn't even know he was still an MP. And he's got a 23,000 majority. Why doesn't he have a by-election?
Well, because... Never seen in Ipswich and Suffolk, was he? Never. The Invisible Man.
Absolutely never.
Well, he's not
and what do you think about him crossing picket lines, which he did regularly as a doctor? Crossing picket lines...
The BMA, of course, is not a Labour-affiliated union, so that doesn't get in the way.
But do you support people crossing picket lines?
Look, we were clear we didn't support the junior doctor strike. Right. So, and one of the reasons he's not there is because he's working hard for his local NHS. And look, he said absolutely clearly that he... the only cure is a Labour government, which I think is what the British people want as well. We need an election. I was half hoping that Rishi would call one way or on air.
Emma, just want a word from you on this change of benefits.
Yeah.
People who need it are going to be devastated today. Genuine claimants.
But hold on a minute. What does mild mean? Because I bet you, if you ask someone, do you have mild depression? Do you have mild anxiety? They say no. It's suddenly extremely severe. So I think it's one of these invisible problems. It's very hard to diagnose. Issues. You don't know how do you measure it. I'm not unsympathetic to those with genuine mental health problems. Of course I'm not. But I can say, as many people have said, the best thing for depression and anxiety is work, purpose, social interaction, being in the world, taking part. And so people do need support. And I like the idea of having more mental health workers. They do need support.
A colleague was telling us earlier just now how a friend of his has been signed off sick because she's grief-stricken over the death of her mother. That's called grief. That's not mental illness.
That is called grief.
That is not.
That is bereavement counselling that you need a couple of evenings a week. Absolutely, grief can be severe, but you do. Of course, you do.
People need to.
And that's
it's about giving people support.
There's too much of that.
Yeah, and it's so easy to say, being cruel to people who are anxious and depressed.
Yeah.
No, it's actually not good for them themselves
people claiming
to be
mental
isolated.
health who've had a major relationship breakup. We've all had one of those.
Yes.
It's pretty horrible.
It is
you have
awful.
to go to work and get on with your life.
But you need carrot
and you forget about
stick.
it.
Absolutely.
This feels all stick. The more I can contemplate this morning, it just feels cruel.
There's you're right, but there's no detail about how they're going to support people in this announcement. It's all lets them seem to be get tough.
The thing is, the anxiety issue is off the scale at the moment of what we might have grown up as just thinking, well, you're just worried.
It is, Bev, but the answer is also resilience. You've got to inculcate and build up resilience in our young people.
If your confidence is so low that you can't get dressed in the morning, if you are so lacking in any sort of strength, you can't even pick up the phone to inquire about a job, then you learn today. Then people will be suicidal.
And also, it's why it's important to support people in schools, because 120,000 children are waiting more than 12 months between diagnosis and treatment.
And it's awful. Right, still to come. Sorry, we've got to go to a quick break. We're going to take some live pictures of Butte House as well. It's widely expected that Humza Yousaf is preparing, there it is, front door, preparing to resign
Not
as
his front door for much longer.
First Minister. We will have that and more after your morning's news with Sam.
Very good morning to you. 10:33, the headlines from the newsroom this hour. As we just heard, Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, could resign rather than face 2 confidence votes this week. Sources suggest he's considering stepping down, but a final decision hasn't been taken so far. He's been struggling to secure support after he terminated a power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens last week. Well, as we've just seen, here's another quick look at that front door, the scene outside Butte House in Edinburgh, where we are expecting to hear from Humza Yousaf, possibly at lunchtime. We will bring that to you live here on GB News. UK and Irish ministers are due to meet in London amid an escalating row over migrants, with the EU also being drawn into the argument. The Irish government says it's seen an increase in asylum seekers crossing from Northern Ireland and plans to return them to the UK. However, sources in Westminster suggest that Britain won't take back any migrants unless the European Union also accepts those coming across the English Channel in small boats. That comes as senior Border Force officials have raised concerns that people crossing the Channel are using children as human shields to evade police. In just 1 week, over 900 migrants crossed to the UK, with 359 arrivals on Saturday alone. 51 of those were rescued after their boat ran aground. Meanwhile, preparations are underway for detention and transfers to Rwanda, marking the final phase of the Home Office implementing the government's plan. And it's being reported that people suffering from some mental health issues will lose access to their sickness benefits as part of big welfare changes. The Times newspaper suggested ministers will propose offering meaningful support, like counselling, instead of benefits payments. Charities, though, claim the move's about cost-cutting and not about care. However, the government argues it shouldn't be paying people to deal with what they've called ordinary difficulties in life. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code there on your screen. Or if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2513 and €1.1694. The price of gold is £1,869.56 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,180 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Anything on Rishi?
Still to come, all eyes on Edinburgh for midday. You excited about this?
Well, I think he, as the nickname implies, he is flipping useless, and he's going to go, and he was Nicola Sturgeon's puppet, frankly. He only got the job because he was Nicola Sturgeon's mate, and they're paying a price now. He simply wasn't up to it, and he's gone because he's going to go because he's not going to survive a confidence vote. They've fallen out with the Greens over some wildly over-ambitious Green targets, which is going to cost people such a lot of money.
But
and that law the other week, you know, about hate crime law.
Yes, the fact that you could now be found guilty in Scotland of inciting hatred by a conversation you might have over your Sunday lunch. Well, it's all backfired, hasn't it? Humza
Really
Yousaf is apparently preparing to resign as First Minister and leader of the SNP. We will bring you that very latest news when it breaks. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Murray, the A96 remains closed each way at Keith after weekend roadworks overran. In Lancashire, the A56 is closed each way along Skipton Road in Colne after an accident causing queues. Buses replaced trains between Wigan North Western and both Blackpool North and Liverpool Lime Street because of overhead line problems. In Lincolnshire, the A158 and other approaches to the Gumby roundabout are closed after an accident. In Gloucestershire, on the A417, there's a lane closed eastbound not far before the air balloon roundabout at Birdlip, where a vehicle caught fire with queues from the A46 at Brockworth. On the M25 in Kent, there's a lane closure for repairs near Junction 5 for the M26, with delays on both the M25 and M26 towards there. And on the M2 in Kent, there's a lane closed eastbound where someone's broken down between Junctions 5 and 6 from Sittingbourne to Faversham, causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
And I did want to give you a platform, but I also want to give you an opportunity to apologise to anyone that you might hurt, and also give a message now to people who might want to copy some of the things that you've done, because people have copied it. So is there anything you'd like to say about that?
So the first thing you addressed, yeah, I do want to say sorry, because I did say sorry in the BBC interview, and that's the only thing they put out as a clip. So I don't know why they tried to do that, but I'll say it again on GB News here. I apologise to all the victims in the past that I've may have caused distress to, may have harassed, may have mentally tormented in any type of way. I apologise to them because I didn't mean to do that, and I was just having fun at the moment, but I didn't realise that it would have negative repercussions and negative effects on their psychological, way of thinking. So I apologise for that. And also, the one thing I have to say to young people is social media isn't real. What I've portrayed to the guys on the internet is that I'm this cool, I don't give a toss about anything. But me as a person, I really do care. And for people I don't really read comments on the internet, because if I was to do that, I would probably go into a depressive state. All I can say to you guys is believe in yourself, and there's bigger things you can do out there than just being an absolute menace on the internet or being antisocial. If you have ambitions, I like to read, I like music. I want to go deeper into my passion so I understand me as a person and not what other people think I am.
You are an articulate young man. You are obviously intelligent as well when you talk like this. And I really hope, for your sake and for the sake of a lot of people who did take a negative influence from what you did initially, that you really don't go back down that route.
I have a child as well, and I have to be there, not just for me, but for my child, for my child's mother, for my mother. I have to be there for a lot of people. It's not just me. So I need to put in the work.
Now, we've got some good news, because the King will return to public life. We think he's going to carry out some duties tomorrow.
Wow. And with just a week to go before Prince Harry visits the UK to mark the 10th anniversary of the Invictus Games, could the family see a reunion? Ingrid Stewart, editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, joins us now. Good morning, Ingrid. Lovely to see you. Sometimes with feuding families, it takes an unexpected and potentially life-changing event to bring them together. Are we going to see that now?
I don't think we're going to see William and Harry together, but I do think that King Charles will make an effort to see his son. He'll want to see him. They'll both be in London at the same time, I believe, because it's the Prime Minister's meeting. So there is no real reason why Harry shouldn't see his father. But, you know, for William, it's a bit different. So maybe they'll get together, but I would only be guessing. And my guess is that they probably won't.
Invictus Games, Ingrid, it has been a great triumph for Prince Harry. We shouldn't take that away from him. It'll be fascinating because he's going to be at that service, I think, at St Paul's next week to mark the 10th anniversary of Invictus Games. Will it be odd if there is no other member of the royal family there? Because that's what I'm hearing. There'll be no royals there at all apart from Harry.
I also heard the same thing. I gather that the actor Damon Lewis is actually reading the poem Invictus. And I think that Harry will probably want to, to take the main stage himself. This is his baby, as if it were, and it's something he's worked at very hard, and perhaps one could say one of his few successes. So I think he will want to claim the high ground.
And King Charles coming back to work. This is great news, and probably, I think, maybe a little sooner than we expected.
Yes, I mean, obviously none of us are oncologists. We don't know the ins and outs of what's wrong with him, but he, as far as everyone's concerned, he's been raring to go. He's been held back from going out and about, and now he finally will be able to. But obviously, his doctors are going to keep a very careful eye on him.
He's and they're still talking, Ingrid, at the palace that later in the year he will be going to Australia for an official visit with Queen Camilla. That would be pretty arduous if he's still having treatment.
Yes, I mean, it's because there's the government heads of government meeting in Samoa as well, and he was going to tie the both in. I think that is entirely dependent on how he is, and as we know, we've heard so much about it. It's different for everyone, so we can't double guess how he's going to be by I think it's by later in the year. Yeah. We hope he doesn't overdo it too much now.
There was some polling over the weekend, Ingrid, wasn't there, about how the Princess of Wales remains incredibly popular with the public still.
Oh, yes. I mean, she's always going to. And I think people are, I think there's a huge groundswell of sympathy for her being the mother of 3 children, having a very high-pressure job, and yet, having to keep it completely in the background. And I think, when we do eventually see her, I mean, we don't know when we're going to. It may not be till later in the year, but it doesn't diminish her popularity one tiny bit.
And what of Meghan? Do I read that she's off to Africa or something to get in touch with her colonial roots?
Yes, she's going to. Well, apparently, she's going to Nigeria with Harry. They've been invited there. Because when she did her sort of DNA test, she discovered she was 43%, I think, Nigerian. So she wants to discover her roots. You're absolutely right. And so they're going on a trip together.
Do you think there's any chance she might stay there?
She's just like a parody of a narcissist.
I know you're hopeful, Andrew. I know you're hopeful, but I don't think so. No.
Sadly.
She's just like the ultimate narcissist. If you had to write a character, and what would they do? I know what they'd do. They would look at their own DNA. They'd work out where they were from. They'd go back and look into their history. I mean, it's always about her. Presumably, there's a Netflix documentary going to be attached to this, is there, Ingrid?
Oh, definitely. I can't imagine that they would actually want to travel all that way without a TV crew with them.
Yeah, very true. All right, thank you so much, Ingrid Stewart there, Editor-in-Chief of Majesty magazine.
When I read it, I thought, this is parody.
It is like parody. She's just the gift that keeps on giving, isn't she?
To discover her colonial ancestral roots, Nigeria. And Harry, so he's going to not be here for long because he's got to then fly out to Nigeria to be with his wife, or whether he's going back to America and then joining her out there. I
foresee another documentary in which she tries to clone herself, possibly working with the giants of the biotech world to create more Meghan Markles. You'd love that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if there are any Markles in Nigeria.
Well, I guess... Well, listen, it sounds like she's piqued your curiosity. You're obviously going to watch this documentary, aren't you?
I doubt that very much. Well, I probably will have... yes, maybe I will. Morbid curiosity, if you can have such a thing.
Would you watch it at home? Would you like to see Meghan Markle go and retrace her roots in Nigeria? Right, lots of your messages coming in this morning, but still to come after Humza Yousaf terminated his power-sharing agreement with the Greens. The move seems to have cost him his position as Scottish First Minister. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to mixed weather conditions across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing some rain at times, but temperatures will also be on the rise. Back to the detail for today now, and we've got an east-west split weather-wise across the UK. Outbreaks of rain moving in across many western spots from the south, turning heavy at times, accompanied by a fairly brisk breeze too. That rain reaching Scotland as we head into the afternoon. So it's the east and southeast that's set to hold on to the best of the conditions. Certainly the southeast of England seeing plenty of sunshine, and in the sunshine it should feel fairly pleasant out and about, with fairly gentle winds towards the southeast too. Temperatures peaking at 16 or 17 degrees, nearer 12 to 14 towards the northwest. As we head into the evening and during the overnight period, further outbreaks of rain will move in across many northern and western parts of the UK, moving up there from the south and again turning quite heavy in nature at times, accompanied by a fairly brisk southerly wind. So it's always the southeast holding on to the clearest skies, but wherever you are, it will be a frost-free night, certainly much milder than in recent nights, lows in the range 7 to 10 Celsius. As for Tuesday, well, the east-west split continues with further pulses of rain moving up across many western spots as we go through the day. Again, the outbreaks of rain turning heavy at times and still quite breezy out across western areas, whereas further east, plenty of fine weather around, lots of sunshine, but notice 1 or 2 showers developing across the southeast as we head into the afternoon. Temperatures are still on the climb though, up to 18 Celsius towards the southeast, so still pretty warm for the time of year, near 17 degrees at best in the north.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday at midnight on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
So ministers are going to overhaul disability benefits, they tell us, with millions facing the biggest welfare reform in a generation. We heard this before.
So those who suffer from depression and anxiety could lose cash handouts in favour of talking therapies and social care packages.
Well, GB News spoke earlier to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, about this overhaul, and this is what he had to tell us.
Targeting those who need the help most. One of the concerns I have, for example, are those with progressive, lifelong conditions where currently we know, sadly, people will not be getting better through time, and yet they're having to go through reassessments, jump through bureaucratic hoops and so on, and I want to really look at whether that's appropriate and we can't do things better. I want to look at best practice internationally, and I want to look at the nature of the support that's actually provided. Should it be cash benefits, or should we also be looking, for example, at healthcare support for those, particularly those that are on PIP through reasons of mental health conditions?
So we're joined now by political commentator Benedict Spence. Good morning, Benedict.
Good morning.
Good morning. Lots of people getting in touch with us this morning. It's 50-50, I would say. Some people saying, yes, get those who are swinging the lead off benefits. There's too many of them. And the other 50% saying things like this. So this is Steve. I had a breakdown 15 years ago, resulting from a number of massive life changes. It was just too much. I had 3 weeks off work, was diagnosed and medicated. I still am. But I went straight back to work. I agree that some people have more extensive issues, but these are the minority. It's nonsense that so many are on long-term sick. Sorry, that's not quite what I wanted it to say. There are those people saying, I've really genuinely struggled, and people like Steve saying, come on, get out there and work.
I think, I mean, this is the difficult thing, isn't it? Whenever we have a conversation about out-of-work benefits, is that you immediately have the extremities, is that lots of people say there are too many scroungers, lots of people not getting back to work. And then from the other side, you have this idea that no, everybody who is on out-of-work benefits absolutely deserves them, and it is impossible to conceive that anybody could ever be trying to be playing the system. When, of course, we all know that the reality is going to be somewhere in the middle. You know, that's the nature of how these things tend to work. The long and short of it is the out-of-work unemployment benefit bill is too large. And you can't get away from the fact that it is absolutely skyrocketed since the start of the government's measures surrounding the COVID pandemic. That's when you see the sort of the significant uptick. But, you know, under the previous, you know, in the sort of the pre-Boris Johnson era, under when Ian Duncan Smith was in charge of work and pensions, we were able to get these numbers down quite significantly. And actually, nobody was sort of suffering unnecessarily. You know, it's the sort of thing that I'm afraid does require, I think, a bit of a firm hand. And of course, you understand that there are always going to be people who perhaps might slip through the cracks a little bit in the system. There will be people who will be unfairly penalised. Well, that's to be expected. But broadly speaking, just because there are people on out-of-work benefits who deserve it doesn't mean that the state should not go after trying to reduce the numbers of people who shouldn't be on them.
It's an interesting expression that Mel Strider's used about people being parked on benefits, which I think is quite an interesting use of words. And if you consider how much the benefit bill is now for unsustainable, £50 billion for working age sickness benefits, but there's benefit saying it's going to rise by another £20 billion before the end of the decade. How can they possibly know that?
I suppose that's just a forecast based on current trends. I suppose it's possible
shocking.
For something sorry.
That is a shocking figure. That would be 70 billion.
It is a shocking figure. You know, that's basically what we've just been able to pledge for upgrading the armed forces to get them to, you know, and not get them to a level that isn't even ready to deploy yet. You know, it's a huge amount of money. And when you think about it, all the other things that we're told we need money for schools, we need money for hospitals. Actually, this is something that could be going towards plugging those gaps. And if there is a suggestion that there are people who don't necessarily need to be on this benefits, it's of course the right thing to go after. I suspect that the forecasting comes from the changing in demographics. Actually, more people are getting older, and actually long before they get to pension age, increasingly a lot of people are effectively clocking out of the workforce. People will say that they have certain lifestyle-related diseases that clock in, you know, long before they can claim their pensions. Fair enough in some cases, but this is obviously an estimation. But as you say, it's an unsustainable amount of money. Yeah, and that's the thing. If your society, if your economy doesn't actually generate the money to support people, it's all very well saying, well, it's inhumane not providing people the means to sort of live off the taxpayer. But the UK economy is stagnant and has been for a very long time. Benefits are a luxury that most countries can't afford. We are fantastically lucky that we can have them in this country, but your economy has to keep pace with that, and ours isn't.
We have, it's heartbreaking actually reading the inbox today, because there are a lot of people who are at home at this time of the day who are genuinely disabled and they can't go to work. And we have to also recognise that those people very, very much need state support, because what else do they have if they don't have taxpayer money to help them in the morning? But something happened during lockdowns, Benedict, whereby young people in particular got used to the idea that if life is a little bit difficult or something happens, even something as mild as what coronavirus was for the vast majority of people, the government will pay you to just stay at home. And they're tech addicted. They don't eat well. They don't get fresh air. They don't have purpose. What do we do with those people?
Oh, it's incredibly tricky. And I mean, it sort of ties into it must be said, I think it ties into a sort of a national malaise in terms of, you know, you're right to pinpoint this. Things are a little bit difficult, so shrug your shoulders and, what are you going to do? We see the same thing actually when it comes to the discussion around mobile phones and social media amongst children. They shouldn't have them. They're dangerous. It's difficult not to give them to them. What are you going to do? And it's that lack of, frankly, it's that lack of, I suppose, gumption, the lack of sort of can-do attitude. Not from young people, actually. I'd say from older people towards policy. It's difficult to get people off of benefits, get them back into the workplace. It's difficult to raise your children properly. That's not coming from sort of 20-year-olds. That's coming from people in their 40s. And a lot of people, of course, in government who aren't necessarily older.
We got to go, Benedict. Great to see you. As always, don't go anywhere. Here's the news.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We hold on to mixed weather conditions across the UK during the week ahead, all of us seeing some rain at times, but temperatures will also be on the rise. Back to the detail for today now, and we've got an east-west split weather-wise across the UK. Outbreaks of rain moving in across many western spots from the south, turning heavy at times, accompanied by a fairly brisk breeze too. That rain reaching Scotland as we head into the afternoon. So it's the east and southeast that's set to hold on to the best of the conditions. Certainly the southeast of England seeing plenty of sunshine, and in the sunshine it should feel fairly pleasant out and about, with fairly gentle winds towards the southeast too. Temperatures peaking at 16 or 17 degrees, nearer 12 to 14 towards the northwest. As we head into the evening and during the overnight period, further outbreaks of rain will move in across many northern and western parts of the UK, moving up there from the south and again turning quite heavy in nature at times, accompanied by a fairly brisk southerly wind. So it's always the southeast holding on to the clearest skies, but wherever you are, it will be a frost-free night, certainly much milder than in recent nights, lows in the range 7 to 10 Celsius. As for Tuesday, well, the east-west split continues with further pulses of rain moving up across many western spots as we go through the day. Again, the outbreaks of rain turning heavy at times and still quite breezy out across western areas, whereas further east, plenty of fine weather around, lots of sunshine, but notice 1 or 2 showers developing across the southeast as we head into the afternoon. Temperatures are still on the climb though, up to 18 Celsius towards the southeast, so still pretty warm for the time of year, near 17 degrees at best in the north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Monday, the 29th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So Humza on the brink. The SNP leader looks set to quit today, holding a press conference after his government faces a vote of no confidence. We'll bring you the latest here on GB News.
Migrant violence is spiking. Border Force officials claim Channel migrants are using children as human shields. They've told us this in a GB News exclusive.
And dying with dignity, the Dame Esther Ranson and Prue Leith join a host of celebrities and campaigners as they back a change in the law on assisted dying. Let us know your thoughts this morning. Send your comments to gbnews.com/yoursay. First, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 11 o'clock. The headlines from the newsroom this hour. As we've just heard, Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, could resign rather than face 2 confidence votes this week. Sources suggest he's considering stepping down, but a final decision hasn't been taken so far. He's been struggling to secure support after he terminated a power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens last week. This, for those watching on television, is a live shot of Bute House, his official residence, where we are expecting to hear from the Scottish First Minister in the next hour. We will bring that to you live here on GB News. In other news, a rescue operation is underway in the Channel with a migrant boat running into trouble off the coast of Calais. That comes as senior Border Force officials have raised concerns that people in small boats are using children as human shields to evade police. In just 1 week, over 900 migrants crossed to the UK, with 359 arrivals on Saturday alone. 51 of those were rescued after running aground. UK and Irish ministers are meeting in London amid an escalating row over migrants. The Irish government says it's seen an increase in asylum seekers crossing the border from Northern Ireland and that it plans to return them to the UK. However, sources in Westminster suggest that Britain won't take any migrants back and will only do so if it can send people who arrive in small boats back to the European Union. It's being reported that people suffering from some mental health issues, including depression and anxiety, will lose access to their sickness benefits as part of new welfare changes. The Times newspaper has suggested ministers will propose offering meaningful support like counselling instead. Charities claim the move is about cost-cutting, not care. However, the government argues it shouldn't be paying people to deal with what they've called ordinary difficulties in life. Minister Mel Stride told us this morning that the UK can't afford a spiralling increase in the welfare bill.
It's very important we also ask key questions about how it operates. Is it properly targeting those who need the help most? One of the concerns I have, for example, are those with progressive, lifelong conditions where currently we know, sadly, people will not be getting better through time, and yet they're having to go through reassessments, jump through bureaucratic hoops and so on. And I want to really look at whether that's appropriate and we can't do things better.
MPs will this afternoon debate whether assisted dying should be legalised for people who are terminally ill. Campaigners and famous faces are now gathered outside Parliament ahead of that debate this afternoon. It's after more than 200,000 people signed a petition backed by Dame Esther Ranson calling for the change. Assisted suicide is currently banned in England, in Wales and Northern Ireland. In Scotland, though, it's not a specific criminal offence, but people who help others to end their own lives do risk being charged with murder or other offences. Those who oppose a change in the law say vulnerable people could be pressured into ending their lives. Hundreds of Border Force officers at Heathrow Airport have begun their 4-day strike in a dispute over working conditions. The PCS union says that more than 300 of its members are walking out until 7 a.m. on Friday in protest over plans to introduce new working patterns, which would see around 250 staff forced out of their jobs. The Home Office, though, says it does have plans in place to minimise any disruption and that they remain open to discussing a resolution with workers. New laws protecting consumers from hacking and cyber attacks are now in force, with all smart devices required to meet minimum security standards. Manufacturers of products like phones, TVs and smart doorbells are now legally required to protect internet-connected devices against access by criminals. Common passwords like 12345 are being banned in the UK as part of that world-first legislation, and users will be prompted to change them. And finally, we're being warned to brace ourselves for even more food price rises, with beer, biscuits and bread among the items expected to jump. The wet weather means that harvests of barley and wheat could be down by as much as a fifth, and storms and flooding throughout the last few months have forced British farmers to constantly delay sowing crops. That warning comes just as food prices were beginning to fall following soaring inflation that was sparked by the global gas price crisis. That's the latest. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. For more, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 11:05. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, we're pretty sure, in fact, we pretty much know Hamza Yousaf is going to resign as Scotland's First Minister and SNP leader. He's holding a press conference around midday today. We'll be there live, of course.
Let's get the latest from GB News Scotland reporter, Tomy Maguire. Good morning, Tony. Good morning. So what are you being told there on the ground?
Good morning. Well, indeed, this has been another rough weekend after the end of last week for Hamza Yousaf. As he promised, he wrote to all of the party leaders over the weekend, asking them to meet him at separate meetings at Bute House behind me, the official residence of the First Minister, and all of them declined his invitation. That then led to increased speculation overnight and indeed this morning that the First Minister was on the precipice of handing in his resignation. And sure enough, around an hour ago, we got word of a press conference being held here at Bute House, where it's believed quite strongly that will be the outcome. Now, it's only been just over a year since we were last here for the resignation of Nicola Sturgeon, and many people will be looking at the year under Hamza Yousaf and wondering what he was able to achieve in that time. Now, he did have opportunities to perhaps break that deadlock. Of course, those 63 votes from the SNP and those two crucial votes of no confidence happening at Holyrood this week, he desperately needed at least one other vote, and it was widely thought that that could come from Alba's singular MSP, Ash Regan. Of course, she was former SNP herself, but now with the Alba party, she gave her list for conditional support for this vote, and indeed Hamza Yousaf has decided to not accept that. Now, that is probably because, you know, that whether he looked for support from the Greens or from Alba, huge chunks of his party would have found issue with that, and then that leads him into just a similarly awkward situation. So this morning, as I said, it's widely believed he is going to hand his resignation in, and much like the situation that got him into this place on Thursday morning last week, it very much looks, at least at this point, that he's going to jump before he's pushed.
OK, thank you very much, Tony. Well, joining us now is Michelle Ballantyne, former MSP for South Scotland Region and former Labour MP. Ivor Kaplan. They are there now, both of them. Good morning. So, Michelle, first of all, your reaction to this news that Hamza Yousaf is set to resign?
Well, I don't think it'll come as a surprise to most people. I mean, he has been quite an embattled First Minister. He's spent most of his time rolling back on all the things he said he was going to support at the beginning. So whether it's a deposit return scheme, you know, his ability to push through things, the climate change agreement with the Greens, his national care scheme, which he's sort of pushed down the line as well. He's ditched the ban on alcohol advertising and the expansion of the highly protected marine areas. And he seems to have little positive ideas to deliver to the electorate. I mean, the sum total of big ideas so far has been freeze council tax again, which he just completely blindsided councils with. And he certainly isn't delivering the red meat to his activists where independence is concerned. I mean, he's really just carrying on what Nicola Sturgeon said, is, well, we'll seek a referendum if we get a mandate through the votes on elections. And it's just looking more and more like he cannot unite the party in any way whatsoever. And meanwhile, you've got Labour on the ascendancy. he can see the writing on the wall the same as the rest of us can. And would he want to spend another year with a divided party, no support from the rest of the parliament, and just no ideas to take forward?
But before we bring in Ivor, I just want to ask you, Michelle, you saw him close up. Is the truth, frankly, he just wasn't up to the job?
Frankly, from my personal opinion, yes. I've watched him in action. I've been in a meeting with him where, frankly, he didn't tell the truth about what was going on. I don't think he's somebody, if I was in his party, I would want as leader. He doesn't have anything to really make you want to get behind him and support him. He was Nicola Sturgeon's preferred candidate because he was going to keep her legacy. He was going to prevent too much trouble for her, I think. Well, he hasn't really succeeded in doing that either. So I think, the Hums of Useless name really has been a credit to the people who donated it to him.
Ivor, what will this now mean for the SNP?
Well, I'm a long way away from Scotland, Bev.
Oh, you're a long way from us now. I'm sorry. Let's go back to. We'll try and get it back. Michelle, I mean, this is whatever we think of Nicola Sturgeon. She was a dominant figure in the Scottish Parliament, and it's been one disaster after another since she went. The stupid law they brought in, the hate crime law, the changes about gender recognition. Just 10 years ago, we had the ballot on independence. Independence is over, and the SNP are going to do very badly, it seems, at the general election as well.
Yes, I mean, independence was their raison d'etre. That is what they exist, in effect, to deliver, and they have failed. Yes, they brought about a referendum, and when they lost that, Alex Salmond stood down, and Nicola Sturgeon stepped in as the automatic candidate. Interestingly, she was actually sort of the lead person, the lead face, if you like, of the independence referendum, and everybody often seems to forget that. So Alex Salmond was punished for not getting over the line, but she in effect wasn't. But she obviously was married to the chief exec, Peter Murrell, and they ran the SNP with a rod of iron. You were not allowed to step out of line. We've all seen all the sort of video clips that have been circulated during all the problems they've had. And it was made quite clear that if you in any way opposed, disagreed, spoke out against, you were punished. So the SNP was a very, very tight ship under the Murrells. The Murrells have gone, and all those, a lot of what's going on isn't necessarily Humza Yousaf's fault, but it is a symptom of that releasing of the pressure that they were all kept under to toe the line and do as they were told. And now, the Murrells are out of the picture for all intents and purposes. They can do what they like. Sorry, I just need to put some power on my system.
That's okay, don't worry. Well, we lost power completely from Ivor Kaplan, so we're doing quite well with you, Michelle. I don't know if we can get Ivor back, actually. No, we've lost Ivor, which is a shame. Who do you think will step into the shoes of Humza Yousaf? Kate Forbes, divisive figure, but popular among some people, and I, for one, really admired her honesty with her controversial opinions on the fact that you shouldn't have sex before marriage.
Well, I mean, I suppose the really positive thing about Kate, and I have to say I did have time for Kate Forbes. I have respect for her as an individual because she has her beliefs and she sticks by them. What we see in a lot of politicians now is they don't have principles that they live by. She does. And I think for that reason alone, whether you agree with her or disagree with her, like what she has to say or dislike what she has to say, you have to respect the fact that she is a woman of her own beliefs that she's willing to live by. She only lost narrowly to Humza Yousaf, which I think was a surprise in some quarters. But then if you want somebody who actually has some intelligence, has some backbone, has things she really believes in, she's your candidate. The others that are in the running, some of them are quite new to the Parliament. Some of them have obviously, Neil's come up from Westminster. But I think that there isn't a clear, outstanding candidate at the moment. And if Humza resigns today, they've only got 28 days to bring in a new leader. So it could be a real fun fight, and it will depend on the rest of the Parliament and whether they agree.
Well, let's bring Ivor Kaplan. Ivor Kaplan, I'm sure you're smiling broadly deep down because this chaos in the SNP can only be good for the Labour Party in Scotland. You used to be the dominant party. You haven't been for a long time. What have you got, 1 or 2 MPs now? This is going to be good news for you come the general election.
Andrew, the simple answer to that is yes. But I mean, just to look at what has been going on in the SNP, you know, I mean, it's been a bit like this ever since they changed leader. It's not been a very, you know, wholehearted feeling as far as people I know in Scotland have been saying. So, I mean, I think it is quite difficult to see how they can get out of this in any sort of way. And I'm not sure that whatever they try and do is going to be very effective. In some ways, how the SNP is being regarded in Scotland, it appears to me, and I'm an outsider, of course, here, is very similar to how the Tories are being regarded in large parts of London, as in large parts of England. And the point being that once that starts to happen, it's very difficult to get away from it. And you know, we can go back in time and see when this has happened previously, but we don't need to do that. So I think that the SNP is going to have a tough time in the general election whenever that comes about.
OK, all right, thank you both. Michelle Ballantyne there, former MSP for South Scotland and former Labour MP Ivor Kaplan this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. As we say, we're watching that front door.
Yeah.
At Butte House. Never quite sure why we watch front doors. I mean, I'm not sure, is he going to come out of it?
Well, his press conference will be inside, because unless he does when Theresa May resigned or Boris resigned, Liz Truss resigned, remember the microphone goes outside, the dais is there with the government crest on, but I don't think so. I think he's doing a press conference inside Butte House, and I mean, maybe he's going to surprise us, maybe he's going to battle on, but it doesn't feel like it.
What do you expect him to say? Who will he blame? Who will he blame?
Well, he'll say that the duplicitous Greens because he just decided that the Scottish people couldn't possibly sign up to. But it was the deal that his predecessor did, Nicola Sturgeon, on net zero. Yeah,
to be honest, whoever he blames will depend on what he wants to do next, won't it? That's what it will.
Yeah.
He won't come out and say that the Green agenda is all wrong if he wants to go and work for a Green lobbying group.
And they'll have a temporary leader while they have a new an election. But, you know, this is terrible timing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, don't go anywhere. We have got a lot more to come, including what is going to affect the price of beer, bread and some other yummy things that we all eat. You're not going to like this, but don't go anywhere. Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Leading motoring organisation has called for all new drivers to be banned from giving lifts to friends for 6 whole months after passing their tests.
Yes, the AA says around 5,000 people every year are killed and seriously injured in crashes involving at least one young motorist. Graduated driving licences introduced with limitations imposed on a period of time after a driver passes their test. So a two-tier system.
Well, is this sensible or yet more ageism when it comes to regulating our habits in the United Kingdom? Let's speak to Quentin Wilson, a motoring journalist and transport campaigner. Really interested to get your thoughts on this, Quentin. There are a lot of people who instinctively will say this is state overreach. This is telling adults that they can't do something that they've done for generations. What's your view?
Well, look, the recent accident with the convertible Mini where people were twerking in the back, this is due to driver education. The person in control of that car really should have told the passengers just to buckle up and stay still. We're not teaching kids to drive properly. We expect them to do all this stuff below the dashboard, grinding of gears, hazard perception, positioning of car in this very, very small time window when we should be doing it from school age, teaching hazard perception. So I've been a patron of an organisation called Young Driver, who's delivered 1.4 million lessons to 11 to 17-year-olds on private land with ADI qualified instructors with dual controls. And the rate for that group is 4%. The national average is 20%. So look, we can do this, we can reduce these fatalities if we teach kids earlier about road safety.
Is this an issue, frankly, with teenage boys and showing off?
The testosterone does always seem to come through, doesn't it?
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday at midnight on GB News.
Well, we're back with the panel with us. We've got Matthew Larser and Emma Wolfe, and they've got lots of stories they want to talk about. What are you going to talk about first? Potholes?
Potholes?
Sorry? Potholes. We can never get enough potholes.
Queued on potholes.
Tell us about the potholes.
Shall I start my sentence with the most boring words? As a cyclist, no. I know we talk about potholes a lot, but the state of our roads, the state of, and we're talking about London, but the state of the roads nationally is absolutely scandalous. There's now information that these contractors fill potholes in with really cheap stuff, cheap filler, which sounds like a sort of bad Botox joke, but cheap filler, which then cracks and explodes the minute a bus or a lorry drives over it.
Why
and then the contractors get paid a second time.
Come back. There's a pothole near me, which we had this conversation the other week.
We did.
Where we keep getting the same pothole, keeps getting fixed.
That's exactly what we said to our pothole experts.
They're giving a sticking plaster rather than a solution. I was talking to an MP last week. He says that the Tories, because the Tories have said they put extra money into fixing potholes, they've all been told to go and point at potholes for their campaign by Conservative headquarters, but he says, I'm not going to do it because it keeps destroying my constituents' cars, who are emailing me at 6 o'clock in the morning saying that it's just taking the bottom off their,
and it's injuries as well, it's lost economic, kind of productivity and all of that. But you can have serious injuries. Hundreds of people have died.
They have.
Since 2018.
But the Tories said, when they cancelled the Northern Link of HS2, the £8 billion saving would be ploughed into potholes, of which 800,000 has been allocated. The rest won't be spent till 2030. Another con.
Exactly, it's another con, and it's deeply unfair because it's then setting up expectations that, as you say, people are looking at the potholes in their area, think they're going to get fixed, but actually they've got to wait a decade.
The Conservatives are now promising a £700 million a year pothole fund, but that's funny that they've suddenly come up with that.
It's not due to start till after the election. So good luck to those Tory MPs who think that pointing at a pothole is going to save them.
Yeah,
I doubt it is.
But for a cyclist, it must be scary at times.
Really scary. I know people who've broken their pelvis going over a pothole, right? I've got a 3-year-old on the back. What do you do when a crater opens up in the road? What do you do? Do you swerve around it and risk going into the traffic? Or do you go over it and under it and risk breaking your collarbone or your pelvis? Honestly, potholes are really appalling.
I was just saying, people think, it's only potholes, but actually what you're describing is it's another one of these little things.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Bev.
That ties into this mental health crisis we're in and this benefit sickness crisis. If you fall off your bike and break your pelvis, that affects your family, your job, your parents. I get the reverberations.
It's a bit like waiting lists, because NHS waiting lists, of course, don't just affect the people who are waiting on them in pain, but it also affects the economy, because, again, that impacts people's ability to work, or if they've got, if it's a grandparent, can't care for a toddler. It's all this domino effect.
That's right.
And the other thing is people have a real sense of sort of malaise at the moment about their community. With prices in the high streets, which is broadly outside government control, and more could have been done to reinvigorate them. But it just seems the sense that everything's falling apart. Just this sort of public conversation. Nothing works. I only get I get like 20 letters like once a week. It's just nothing quite works in this country, and it adds to that sense that everything's going in the wrong direction.
Is a switch going to be flicked if Keir Starmer is in Downing
No,
Street.
it's not, and one of the things is Labour's key is trying to capitalise on this malaise with using the old Ronald Reagan question: do you feel better off than you did in this case 14 years ago? And the answer is no. But the problem is, as you say, there isn't a switch, because unlike when Labour came in '97, when the money was flowing, there ain't no money, so you can't just suddenly fill those potholes, sort out the high streets just like that. And I think expectations management is going to be hugely important.
Particularly when it comes to the NHS, Matthew,
Absolutely.
which is, of course, is Labour's strongest point. And people will think a Labour government now, everything's going to be rosy, and it won't be.
No, and I mean, Wes Streeting, who is our very impressive health spokesperson, Shadow Health Secretary, has been clear that, A, he's going to buy capacity in the private sector in the short term, but you need reform. So fingers crossed it's not just... and I mean, it was quite fun when he said, we're going to take on our, the middle-class people who say we can't change the NHS and can't use private things, and actually I'm going to do that. So fingers crossed that some reform would back it. But that needs to happen in other areas. We haven't heard so much in education.
Yeah, well, talking of which, Emma, there's a poll that's found that almost half of patients hardly ever or never see the same GP.
Yeah, and
continuity of care is so important for people's
really think so. I remember my GP years ago was the same GP who had originally told my mum, you're having another baby.
Yeah.
And it was a family doctor who had been with us for like 20 years. Matthew has some amazing stats.
Yeah, so there's
about
an amazing statistic
difference in mortality.
from the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, which finds that patients who kept the same family doctor for more than 15 years, this was up to 2018, they had a 25% lower chance of dying at the end of it. 25%. I mean, I have a repeat prescription, but I haven't bothered checking for ages, and then suddenly I got a call. We do it online. Got a call last week, but it was actually from the GP that I knew, that I'd seen or haven't seen, and suddenly I felt this huge sense of kind of relief that you're speaking to somebody who knows who you are and knows, the circumstances, why they originally prescribed the medication in the first place. You can have a grown-up conversation.
But you see, the statistics have backed this up in maternity care for decades. It was known that if you had a midwife that you knew, the continuity of care, there was less perinatal mortality, less postnatal depression, better breastfeeding, less drugs needed in birth, fewer caesarean sections. But because it was just a person looking after another person, it's never funded. If there was a pill, imagine if there was a pill that would give you 25% less chance of dying, the pharmaceutical companies would, and the government would buy it up. But because it's just a human being looking after another human being, Matthew, they're not funding it.
But it's also the placebo effect is really important in healthcare. Really important. When you have confidence in your care, when you have confidence that you can talk to someone. I find with younger doctors, and this is maybe unfair, that they will stare at the screen. They don't even look at the thing that you're presenting with. They stare at the screen, they ask you some questions, you repeat everything that you've repeated for the last 10, 20 years, whereas with older doctors, maybe they're not so up to date, maybe they haven't just trained, but often they're actually looking at their patient, they're talking to their patient. My father, who was in his 90s, used to say, before he died, he used to say, you know what the first thing a doctor did? Take your clothes off and lie down on the couch. They would look at you. They would... Well,
get their stethoscope
quite exciting. But they would look at you.
You banged your thumb when you were doing something.
Yeah. Let's have a look. But they would look at you. They would look at the patient's body.
And
they would have a check. They would look at things, not stare at a screen and fill in tick boxes.
And what's frightening about this is that the GPs are actually trying to fight back against the what seems to be the sort of peer-reviewed medical evidence. Professor Camila Hawthorne, who's the chair of the Royal College of GPs, says that it isn't always necessary for patients to see the same GP or even a GP for every appointment.
Well, I always think of Nick Robinson, who was the presenter of the BBC. He was waiting in a doctor's surgery to see... He couldn't see his doctor. He had seen another doctor previously. I was seeing a different doctor, and he was still ill. But his own GP was walking past him and he said, well, look at the state of you. You better come in and see me. He said, well, I can't... Because he'd got cancer, and the doctor could just see how much weight he'd lost. He could see
because he knew him and he could compare.
He'd known him for 20 years.
And he was looking at him rather than staring at a screen.
Whereas I'm not saying the other
literally
doctor
saved his life.
Could have saved his life.
Even if it's a young doctor who's seen you who's seen you and got that continuity of care. I mean, these figures were actually unveiled by the Lib Dems, to be fair to them, and the worst select region is the South East, where only a quarter of people had seen the same GP in the past 2 years, which of course ties in with discontent in the blue wall, which the Lib Dems are trying to, in traditional Tory territory, trying to capitalise on.
Yeah. But how do we... Well, let's move on. Let's get... How do we fix NHS? We can't do that in one day, can we? Emma, tipping.
Yes.
The legal requirement is changing about tipping?
Yeah, so in French restaurants, there used to be the service compris, the 15% service charge that was included in prices. So you knew where you were. It wasn't like in America where every time you order a beer or a glass of wine, you've got to leave more money each time. Now, French restaurants, Parisian restaurants, are changing. There's a bit of an arms race to get higher tips. I know you've both been away recently. Higher tips. And this is thought to be ahead of the Paris Olympics, so they're all kind of jockeying for position.
So what do they want? They want more than 50%?
I mean, you get really quite surly service in France, and particularly in Paris. You get pretty surly waiters and things like that. But you didn't have to worry about the tip thing. They had no kind of...
All included.
They had no interest. Yeah, and now they're going to be jockeying for tips.
Are you uncomfortable about tipping?
Yeah, I mean, I think tipping is a great thing when you can express gratitude for the service. It's a bad thing when it's just on the
part of the bill.
And of course, one of the consequences of, I mean, I must admit, I tap away with my card. But one of the consequences now is, of course, a lot of places are cash free. A lot of restaurants are cash free in particular, and therefore you can't, say, "Oh, take the service charge off. I'll give you a." It all just becomes terribly awkward.
Yeah.
So we're sort of wedded into this model of the service charge being stuck on the bill.
Add it to the list of other irritating things which are making people depressed.
Country's going to hell in a handcart.
Isn't it? Well, this is across the... But you see, I like to take a little bit of cash, and then if I pay for my bill on my card, but I will directly tip the waiter with the money.
Same at the hairdresser. I will always leave like a £5 or something.
Yeah.
I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
I have to tip myself.
But separate to the tip.
But in Israel, the first question is, and how are you going to pay your service charge? And sometimes they chase you down
And
the
in
street.
America, you get abuse or very surly service if you don't keep throwing down the greenbacks,
Yeah, and if the service isn't great, you're not going to get tipped.
And tipping at British pubs, of course, these new tip machines where you can tip...
So infuriating. You've ordered half a pint of bitter, and they want to know if you're going to tip them.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Absolutely not.
Matthew, can we talk about the weather?
Absolutely. So, look, it looks like... OK, fingers crossed. I don't want to tempt fate, but it looks like... it's been a grim April, hasn't it? I don't know about you, but I had the heat on
Wellies
Friday,
out yesterday,
and the umbrella... So we saw a little bit of sunshine yesterday, but it looks like from Wednesday, certainly in the sort of south and east of the UK, temperatures are going to get up to, dare I say it, 20 degrees.
Oh, my God.
It's good to see that wet April is behind us, but don't get too... It's not going to last that long, but at least there'll be some sunshine later in the week.
Brilliant. Right, Matthew, thank you so much for that. We're going to be bringing you any more news on this Humza Yousaf resignation after your morning's news.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 11:30. The headlines from the newsroom this hour. Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf could resign rather than face 2 confidence votes this week. We're expecting a news conference in Edinburgh in the next half an hour or so. Well, the Scottish First Minister has been struggling to secure support after he terminated a power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens last week. Speaking in the last few minutes, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says people in Scotland are being failed by an SNP government.
I despair at the situation in Scotland. It's absolute chaos now from the Scottish Parliament, from the SNP. So you've got chaos in the Scottish Parliament, you've got chaos in the Westminster Parliament, and the Scottish people are being fundamentally let down. 1 in 7 are on waiting lists. There's a cost of living crisis, and all the SNP can offer is chaos. And we've got to turn the page on this now. We need that general election and a fresh start.
A rescue operation is underway in the English Channel with a migrant boat running into trouble off the coast of Calais. That comes as senior Border Force officials have raised concerns that people making the crossing are, they say, using children as human shields to evade French police. In the last week, over 900 people arrived in the UK, with 359 migrants intercepted on Saturday alone. 51 were rescued after running aground. MPs will debate whether assisted dying should be legalised for terminally ill people this afternoon. It's after more than 200,000 people signed a petition backed by Dame Esther Ranson calling for the change. Assisted suicide is currently banned in England, in Wales and Northern Ireland. In Scotland, it's not a specific criminal offence, but people who help others to end their own lives do risk being charged with murder or other offences. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2527 and €1.1692. The price of gold is £1,870 and 1 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,185 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Massive show coming up at noon, says Patrick Christie's with his Mrs. Emily.
It is indeed. It is going to be a massive show. Of course, we're going to be kicking off with potentially Humza Yousaf's resignation at 12 o'clock midday, so you won't want to miss that. What will he say? What will he say? Will it be a quick one? Will he take lots of questions? Is this, you know, he's the wokest, most progressive politician in Scotland? Is this a case of, you know, go woke, go broke?
Useless man, what massively out of his depth.
Well, he fell upwards, didn't he? Failed upwards. He failed upwards.
Over-promoted, perhaps?
1 year and 1 month in the job, and now he's been found out. Potentially, we'll have to wait and see. But look, another big breaker that we're going to have for you is just before 1 p.m. We're expecting a press conference between British and Irish delegates, because there's an almighty row going on over illegal immigration at the moment. They want us to take the migrants back. We're saying no, unless we can maybe send them out to France, which isn't going to happen. We've also got the EU copying the Rwanda plan. And that exclusive from Mark White on migrants, channel migrants using children as human shields. But yeah, just before 1 p.m, we'll take that conference live, so make sure you're locked in for that.
Yes, lots of live events today. We're also going to be discussing Harry and Meghan, their royal trip to Nigeria. What's all that about? Is that a snub to the royal family?
Colonial roots, my God, it's like a parody, isn't it?
Well, it is a bit, really, isn't it? I think they're trying
I couldn't believe I was reading. I thought, this can't be right, this story.
Well, they're going to have to explain to everyone who they are, aren't they, first? But, there we go. But Hamburg as well, just a final one for you as well. They want the Sharia and the Caliphate, some people in Hamburg. So this is, a really, I think, visible now impression of what, radical Islamic immigration is doing across Europe. So we've got footage of that. So we'll be weaving all of that in.
Yeah, very worrying stuff.
Brilliant. Right.
That's great.
Patrick and Emily from Midday.
The dream team.
For now, though, Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
This new hate crime bill on women's issues, you think this is the least funny April Fool's joke in history?
Yeah, although the Scottish Government and the Scottish Police do seem to be trying to make a bit of a joke of it when, their campaign Hate Hurts is fronted by a hate monster who's a sort of cuddly, bright red Muppet-style thing. And some of the things that Humza Yousaf said about it were from a soft play centre over the weekend. But yeah, it's really not a joke. It's not actually clever lawyers who know the wording of the law who enforce the law. It's the police. And the police have basically not been trained on this at all. There's a 2-hour online training course they're meant to have done, and lots of them haven't already done it. And we know from the way that the police have been talking about it that they're wildly overstretching what it might actually be to be, in particular, abusive, which is one of the words in the new law, and specifically on the issue of transgender identity. To claim that just noticing the fact that there are two sexes and that sex can't change is meant to be hateful, that even after years of trying to study it, I can't understand why people hold this belief. But it's part and parcel of a pattern of legal measures that the Scottish Government has either introduced or has sought to introduce. So it tried to introduce gender self-ID, but that was overruled by Westminster because it was out of the power of the devolved government. It's still attempting to bring in a conversion therapy law, which sounds nice but isn't nice. It actually criminalises proper ethical treatment of gender-confused youngsters. They're trying to say that men who have certificates saying that they're women count as women for a particular measure to do with public boards. And then this hate crime law, which tries to make it really difficult for someone to talk in a factual, reality-based, clear, understandable way about all these measures. It all adds up to a sort of an authoritarian attempt to deny the fact that human beings are mammals and come in two sexes, and that recognising that matters for women's rights especially.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
11:39, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So Border Force officials have told GB News of concerns that Channel migrants are using children as human shields to stop police puncturing their small boats.
Our Home Security Editor Mark White was given exclusive access to the Small Boats Command in Dover. Here is his exclusive report.
This is a rare look inside the Small Boats Operational Command at Dover Harbour. As we filmed, the Border Force vessel Defender was alongside, offloading another 66 Channel migrants, the latest of more than 7,000 who've arrived here so far this year. And this, their mode of transport, large but extremely flimsy inflatable rafts, made for the criminal gangs in backstreet factories.
I mean, these aren't seaworthy for anything because they are just not made to any standard.
Trevor Taylor has seen increasing numbers packed into these vessels. 70 or 80 migrants on each boat is now common.
It's just not safe. The way it's constructed, I mean, this is typical where if there was a cut or a puncture in one part of this boat, the whole thing would go down.
Makeshift puncture repair kits and cheap pumps are often all the migrants have as they battle to stay afloat. And there are very few, if any, effective life jackets.
Just show you an example of that. And that's probably not just for a child. They'll probably give that to an adult as well, saying that's going to save you. Another example, just back here, is an inner tube. We quite often see them, or they're handed out in a packet. So basically, if you panic, inflate one of those yourself.
And the engines too are completely unsuitable for the English Channel, lacking power and prone to breaking down.
You look at the engine, you might think, yeah, that's a proper engine, something you might expect. However, the organised crime groups, they put stickers like this on there, so 30, trying to trick you into thinking, 30 horsepower. In reality, it's somewhere between 10 and 15, so really not suitable to go on the boat itself, especially at sea.
The surge in violence along the French coast is of huge concern to authorities on both sides of the Channel. Staff in Dover have seen increasing numbers of migrants arriving with injuries, including stab wounds.
The violence that is now shown to our French colleagues trying to prevent the launches, trying to save these people from putting their lives at risk is huge. We've seen them attacked with sticks, metal bars, machetes, using women and children that are there to cross, using them as human shields to prevent law enforcement taking action. And it's growing, it's getting worse.
This quayside here at Dover Harbour is where the Channel migrants first set foot on British soil. Of course, if Rishi Sunak's Rwanda plan comes to full fruition, then they won't be here for long. Many of them will be on a flight to East Africa. But those flights are likely still months away, and as weather conditions improve in the weeks ahead, many more of these flimsy migrant boats will arrive in UK waters, unseaworthy and dangerously overloaded. Mark White, GB News, at the Small Boats Operational Command in Dover.
So our Home Security Editor Mark White joins us now. Mark, the question that we were just contemplating, how easy was it for GB News to be given access to that sort of system?
Not easy at all. We've been asking for the better part of 2 years now to be allowed down there to take a look. It's clearly very sensitive. While we were there filming, another boatload of migrants came in. 66 of them were being offloaded. So there is some real concern. They do occasionally have foreign media in there because they want to get the message out to people from around the world. For instance, they had Vietnamese TV in recently because they want to get the message to people from Vietnam, don't come in small boats because you'll get turned around. Eventually you'll get sent back to Vietnam. In fact, Vietnamese migrants now account for the biggest single group on the small boats this year.
But will they get turned around and sent back?
Well, eventually, yeah. I mean,
3 years' time?
The Albanian system worked a bit better in that the Albanian government was willing to take them pretty much straight back again. So the numbers coming on the small boats from Albania have completely dried out. However, having said that, they're now coming in lorries. They're being picked up on the borders of Eastern Europe and they're being driven to northern France and coming across that way.
The business with the children, though, is disgusting. What they're doing with these children.
Well, this is a real concern, it has to be said. It, I think, goes to some way to really highlighting what are very worrying levels of violence now that are occurring on the beaches of northern France, because these migrants are desperate to get across. The last thing they want is a French policeman coming up and puncturing their boat. So they're now fighting back. They're using, in some cases, machetes. Even firearms are being used to threaten the French police. And as well as that, they're lifting up children. They're using women. To be fair, there are very few women and children on these boats, but usually one or two, and they're being used to try to act as human shields so that the French don't come near them.
Mark, you know this topic better than anybody, and I was saying earlier that having just been recently in Marrakesh and seeing the extreme poverty, I don't blame these people for wanting to be economic migrants and come here. It doesn't mean that I think they should, but I understand their motivation for doing so. Do you see enough collaboration around the world to tackle that problem?
Well, not really, and I think the international community does need to get together to think about how on earth they are going to deal with what is global poverty, because on the beaches of northern France, I've been many times over the years and previously at another broadcaster, speaking to those people who want to come to the UK. The vast majority told me they wanted to come over for a better life, not because they were fleeing for their lives. And yeah, they're leaving behind desperate situations with dysfunctional governments. But does that fall into the criteria of what the Refugee Convention was set up for, to help these people who were in fear of their lives? No, they are effectively economic migrants. But of course, they have a wretched situation they're trying to get away from. And I think these problems need to be solved in their own backyard, in their countries, with other investment on an international scale, though, not just individual countries, because there are, you know, quite, I think, very accurate and legitimate estimates saying that within a few years' time, you could have 1 billion people on the march because of poverty, because of climate change and all of the above.
But isn't this part of the Agenda 2030, the UN global goals that we've heard so much about? And my understanding is that by 2030, if you are considered a climate migrant, you will have a right to go and live anywhere.
Well, that might be an aspiration of the United Nations, but without a shadow of a doubt, individual governments would never put up with that. Even in Europe, where there are policies on accepting people coming in as asylum seekers into the European Union, you're seeing a marked shift there, where they now want to ape the policies of the UK in terms of looking for third-party countries that they can send people who are coming illegally into the European Union to have their asylum system, their asylum applications then considered in those countries.
Amazing. Even Ursula von der Leyen's party, the Queen of the European Commission, is looking at a safe third party, safe third country. Amazing.
because they know they are looking at the global situation and they know that it is becoming unmanageable.
Yeah.
There are many, many hundreds of thousands who crossed into Europe last year, and that will only grow in the years ahead.
Okay.
Incredible.
All right, thank you, Mark. Fascinating. Now, still to come, we're going to be joined by a lead campaigner from Dignity in Dying to speak about their campaign as MPs today debate whether euthanasia should be legalised in the UK. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest update from the Met Office for GB News. An east-west split with the weather today, a soggy one in parts of the west, a mostly dry and bright one across the east. Low pressure is dominating out west, and this weather front in particular providing outbreaks of rain. Notice the isobars squeezing together as well, so the breeze is increasing, so it's turning wet and windy across West and South Wales. Rain creeping into the southwest of England. May get a bit brighter in Belfast. The rain will spread its way steadily into most of Scotland, although the far north may stay dry. Best of the fine weather, though, across the Midlands and eastern England. A much brighter, drier and warmer day here compared to yesterday. Temperatures getting to 15, 16, 17 degrees, but feeling cooler with the wind and the rain further west, which will spread into northern Scotland through this evening. It stays pretty damp over the West Midlands and South Wales for much of the evening too. Further pulses of rain coming into southwest England. The rain easing for Northern Ireland, southern and central Scotland. And notice East Anglia in the southeast stay dry and clear. Most towns and cities dipping down to about 7 to 10 Celsius. On to Tuesday, it's a pretty similar story actually. There'll be further rain out west, some heavy pulses of rain for Northern Ireland especially, but also Wales and southwest England seeing further rain coming in during tomorrow. But much of the Midlands, eastern England, most of northern England too, dry and bright tomorrow and getting warmer still. Temperatures creeping up further. We may get up to 17 or 18 Celsius. Again, cooler further west.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's